G'day all. So I've just come back from watching Formula One, and if there's one thing I try to do consistently is anytime there's a racing movie, I really want to go out and check it straight away out at the cinema. So although Formula One's been out now for a couple of weeks, I finally got the chance due to some traveling and some moving and whatnot to get a chance to look at it now. And yeah, I'm just going to give my thoughts on it. Now, this is more or less a review, although Formula One's been out now a couple of weeks. This is a review of Formula One, but it's also a review in comparison to two of my other favorite racing movies, 2013's Rush and 2019's Ford vs. Ferrari. Heads up, there will be spoilers in this review, because it's not just a comparison, it's also a review on itself, so there will be spoilers towards the end. So heads up, you have been warned. I'll give a bit of an extra warning right when I get to the spoilers. I'll leave that for the end of the review. Now, off the bat, first thing that struck me was the sound. So the sound design, that's going to be my perhaps biggest praise for this film, is just the sound design itself. I think it's Oscar worthy. I think it should win an Oscar. It was that good. Now, moving on from that, the other things that were impressing me in this story, it's a familiar tale because, as people know, the director of this is Joseph Kosinski, and he's the guy that directed Top Gun Maverick. So he's basically repurposing the similar formula. He co-wrote this film, and he's repurposing the similar formula of the old master, bringing in his talent to show the modern world what he can do. And in this story in particular, you got Brad Pitt's character. Now, Brad Pitt has always been one of my favorite actors. He just always seems to bring his A game no matter what. He never phones it in. And in this one in particular, it's no different. However, one thing I did notice with this film, I automatically got from Brad Pitt's character of Sonny Hayes a feeling of channeling Steve McQueen, especially from Le Mans. He's really got that, that stoic alpha, laser focused. He just brings that similar presence in this film in particular. So you got to like him straight away. Just automatically, his character is endearing, and you do like what he brings to the table. The story itself has some interesting points to it. Basically, just a rundown of the story is you got Javier Bardem's character, who's playing this Formula One racing team manager, who seems to be in a bit of a pickle where his company needs to have at least one finish to come out first in at least one race, or he loses the company. So he hires Brad Pitt's character, who they used to be rivals, if I'm not mistaken, I think on the same racing team. And he brings him in, and he wants him to sort of get him back into Formula One, something that he did, I think, 30 years prior to this story. And again, with Brad Pitt's character, he's not exactly just out there been doing nothing. He's still pretty successful backup driver, so he's not exactly coming out of nowhere. The other thing that really caught my attention in this film, compared to other racing movies, is this idea of team. So this film in particular really gets into the whole teamwork thing. It's not a one-man thing, or it's not like two co-drivers and the story just focuses on them. The story focuses a lot on the whole technical aspect of Formula One racing, or just racing in general. It's just something that me personally, I haven't really seen to this degree. I haven't seen this much in this degree, this much technicality to the racing, like the aerodynamics, the individual players that make up the team, the mechanics, the engineers, and so forth. And you've got a number of standouts from those characters. And like I mentioned, no one's phoning it in. Everyone's right there. So props to the actors, and more than likely props to the director himself, who probably brought out the best of everyone. The other standout performance would have to be Kerry Condon, who's playing the lead engineer. She herself, she brings a great presence to the film. Kerry plays a very good role in this, and her character is just very good. She doesn't follow any tropes, and that's the other thing. You could argue that Brad Pitt is playing the trope of the old race car driver who's come in, and he's just trying to get back into the circuit, trying to get this or that. He might be playing a little bit of a trope, but if there are tropes in this film, it's played so well you don't pay attention to that. Now, in all this, the story itself is pretty good because you've got Brad Pitt's older character, old school, racing side by side with his teammate Joshua Pearce, who's played by Desmond Idris. And again, I haven't seen this character, or this actor, in playing the other roles that I can remember off the top of my head, but he holds his own, like he's very good at it as well. Now, how would I compare this to, say, Rush and Ford v Ferrari? Now, I'd seen all these films, as mentioned, when they came out the cinema, like within the first week or two of when they came out. Like, Rush was the first film I'd had seen in the UK when I arrived here back in 2013. I'd seen that at the cinema and I was just blown away by it. And I liked... That was more or less what got me interested in Formula One. The other thing that got me interested in Formula One more than anything else, I think, would have to be the 2010 documentary of Senna, which I didn't see initially. I saw that a few years later. And more or less Rush got me into interest in Formula One racing, which got me interested in seeing that documentary. And the more I'd seen, the more I enjoyed it. Now, several years down the track, I'd heard some good things about Ford v Ferrari. Heard it was based on a true story. So I decided I got to watch that. And again, I was very much impressed by that film. I was very much impressed by the next racing film, Ford v Ferrari, which, although is not Formula One, it's based on true events, and it's based on the circuit of Le Mans. Having said that, the one negative I think this film's got going against it, this new film, the F1 2025's F1, the one negative it's got against it compared to Rush and Ford v Ferrari, it's not based on a true story. So it's not based on actual events, though I imagine a lot of the stories told are based on historical events individually that might have happened to different drivers, different time periods, different decades, for example. And it's not even a negative. It's not, there's nothing wrong with having a fictitious story based in real world events. And here's another thing about this film I found interesting. It's using actual modern day race drivers to tell the story. But they're actually kept in the background for most of the film. They're not really in it. It's funny that because there's no clear-cut antagonist in this film. For like 2/3 of the film, there's no antagonist in any way, shape, or form. It's just basically a story that kind of develops itself where you got the new young driver who's concerned about his place on the team and his place in Formula One. And in seeing Brad Pitt's character come in, initially, which I did like, which I did find funny, was Brad Pitt's character in this film is barely scraping by in terms of like how his performance comes out. And the other thing that I did like, now this is where we're getting a bit light spoilers. I'm not spoiling too much at the moment. I'm not spoiling the ending, but I'll get into that. The thing I liked about Brad Pitt's character was while he was driving, he was purposely fumbling. He was doing every trick in the book, not so much to come out front, not so much to win himself. Brad Pitt just basically does every trick he can in this film. His character, Sonny Hayes, uses every trick he can to more or less, I don't want to say the word sabotage the other drivers, but to sabotage the race enough legally where it gives his team member a chance to come out in front. And that's something that I really enjoyed. What other aspects of the film that I did find that I liked a lot was they really did play on the contrast between Pierce and Sonny, where we see them in their training montage, which gave me a bit of Rocky IV vibe, where we see Pierce be more like the Ivan Drago type, where he's using all this technical, technical computers and all that, whatever, to help him with his training, bring out his peak performance. Where you see Brad Pitt's character of Sonny is 100% old school, and he's just out there on the racetrack. He's jogging early in the morning. He's doing everything he can to stay fit. And that's another part that I really liked about this. It didn't just show about the car's performance, it also showed about the driver's performance. And it does really show something that I had not seen before. Up until about 2/3 of the film, it's more of an internal story, more like a situation of what's going on within the company itself, within the racing company itself. the struggles in trying to keep the car in to give it a better performance, and just the technical aspect of it, which is something I really, really liked about this film as well, was sort of the behind the scenes details, the technical aspect, and how it showed the involvement with not only the drivers, which Brad Pitt was shown to be really involved in his strategy for how the race was going to be run, but again, the technicians, something that I think this film had over Rush and the other racing films. As the story goes, this is one of the things that I did find was a bit odd, or that did feel a bit tropey, was where, now we're getting into actual like spoilers, was where we had one character in particular show up, and he's supposed to be like an ally toward Javier Bardem's character. He's supposed to be like a member of the board, and at first he's like, oh yeah, I want this to succeed, I want you guys to win, and he's all supportive and whatnot. But then his main purpose in the story is shown to be revealed that he's just basically there to sabotage the team, to sabotage the whole situation. And this is kind of where it kind of gives me certain vibes where it just feels too tropey, where it feels too much like all of a sudden this villain behind the scenes is, you know, doing all he can to sabotage for his own financial benefits. Coming towards the end, almost out of nowhere, 2/3 into the film, Lewis Hamilton becomes a presence. Not so much that he's shown during the film, not so much that he's given screen time, that becomes towards the end of the film, becomes this rival, like, out of nowhere. He becomes all of a sudden the top rival, which, of course, he is the number one Formula One race driver right now at the moment, so it actually fits to have him be, you know, seen as the guy to beat in this story, so it does play a bit in. And he's more or less referred to more than anything else than shown. Like, his character is more or less that mountain that they've got to climb. Now, comparing this to Rush and Ford v Ferrari, the big difference with those two films is you've got Ford v Ferrari set in the 1960s, and you've got Rush set in the 1970s. And this one here, this new one, F1, of course, is based in modern times. It's based in 2024-25. So there's that big difference where you do lose some of that situation where how things were done in the past, where even now you'd be taken back to see some of the, you know, some of the risks they would take, some of the situations they be put in, these drivers, where health and safety was not as prioritized back then as it would be today. And that's one of the things where it's, in comparing it to those films, I've got to take that into consideration, where Rush and Ford v Ferrari were very close between themselves. There was like maybe a 10-year gap in the story between each one, so there wasn't that big of a difference in racing from the 1960s to the mid-70s. Whereas Formula One or F1, there have been like considerable, it's been now like close to 50 years difference. I think Rush was set in 1976-77, and Formula One or F1 was set now, as mentioned. So that's a big 50-year difference. To see where racing had gone from in Formula One from 1976 to now, it does play out a bit, this film, where it's like, wow, you do see a lot more of the technical aspects. The other thing that was pretty good was Brad Pitt's character is shown to have been from the 90s, and he is mentioned as being like a direct challenger to like Michael Schumacher and Ayrton Senna. And as good as Brad Pitt's character is in this film, as good as you know, Sonny Hayes, the character, is in F1, there's something a little bit you know, just doesn't take it all the way to the top to be like, I have to admit, like in Rush, you really like got involved with the characters. You really got involved in James Hunt's story and Niki Lauda's story. In Rush, the actors did really feel like the characters. There was something about they did feel like the actual people, especially like Daniel Brühl playing Niki Lauda. His was like really like the main focus of that story, even though the story was about also like Chris Hemsworth, James Hunt. They really sort of immersed themselves so much into it where it's very hard to detach from the actual Niki Lauda and Niki Lauda as seen in Rush. And very similar with Christian Bale playing Ken Miles. and even Matt Damon as Carroll Shelby, they were so good in their role, they were so immersed in that role, where they kind of got lost in it. Where in this instance, Brad Pitt, he seems like he's referencing or he's channeling Steve McQueen, and that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's something about that that kind of just doesn't get it over the line, where it's just not as memorable in my opinion. Whereas in the case of Rush and Ford v Ferrari, there is much more character development. We get to learn more about, Niki Lauda and James Hunt, and get more like to see the family aspect of Ken Miles. Where in the case of F1, we don't really get too much of a backstory on Brad Pitt's character. We do hear about, how he's been divorced several times. He's got a gambling problem. I really did enjoy the film. I really thought it was well done. The one or two things that kind of felt a bit off or a bit odd to me was the editing. The editing was very fast paced, very fast cutting. That was one of the things where I get it. It's kind of like reflective of the whole situation of Formula One, where everything's like so fast, so choppy, where it's just everything's got to be quick. But there were just moments where it was bouncing back and forth between characters so quick. It was like less than, I don't know how many frames. It was like only a few frames before they'd cut to another character, back and forth. And that did take me a little bit out. The other aspect that took me out, which I kind of think they might have overdone, was where they had the camera in the actual like Formula One itself. They had the camera do a 180 sort of situation in real time. You'd see the camera like be looking at front, do the rotation, go back, do the 180, and it was good once or twice when they used it, but they used it a few too many times, I think, and that's something that kind of took me out of the whole situation. But those were like little bits that kind of, I don't know, I personally didn't like it, and other people might like it. I personally didn't. How would I compare F1 with Rush and Ford v Ferrari? Putting that part aside, putting that whole historical aspect aside, comparing F1 to Rush and Ford v Ferrari, I think I would have to rank F1 probably third. So it's kind of funny because between Rush and Ford v Ferrari, it's always interchangeable for me. It's like on any given particular day, I might say like Rush is my favorite or Ford v Ferrari is my favorite. And I've got some biases because I really do like the Ford GT40. So that for me has always been like a bit of a, I've always been a bit of a Ford person myself. But compared to those two, F1 is still fresh, so I don't want to be too, definitive. I do want some time to go by, watch it several times to appreciate it a bit more. But it's hard to say where it's going to rank up there because you've also got some historical films, historical racing films like Grand Prix with James Garner, which even that for its time was way ahead of its time. And it was taken so dead serious. It was such a good film. Would I go watch F1 again? Probably not in the cinema. I mean, I had a good time, don't get me wrong, and, I might just one day be like, I'll just watch it again, depending on the circumstances. But I definitely will be buying it on, 4K. I definitely will be, analyzing the film over and over again just to have a good look at it and just to really enjoy it and really get as much as I can, because there's a lot to be taken in this film. There's just so much to be taken in where it does deserve multiple viewings. So, at the end, would I recommend F1? 100%. Is it a good film? Definitely. And for me, it would now be in that trifecta of like Rush, Ford v Ferrari, and then F1. Like, I'd probably be watching them back to back. That's how much I liked all three of them. I hope you enjoyed this review. Hope it was helpful. In comparing it to Rush and Ford v Ferrari, I hope I didn't disappoint anyone. Everyone has their own favorite, and I think a lot of people agree that Rush has probably become the highest standard where it could be considered the number one racing film. But there are people out there that love like Tom Cruise in Days of Thunder, and I get a kick out of that film. And it's a totally different setting. It's so, even though it's like 1990, it feels so much like an 80s film Hope you enjoyed this review. And yeah, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in all the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Cheers.